Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition?
I do.
Please state your name and spell your last for the record.
Sydney Ogden, O-G-D-E-N.
You may be seated.
Before I proceed, may I request Dr. Bailiff to move Exhibit A and B and please?
Yes, please. You may proceed.
Oh, before I proceed, may I also ask for a time check?
Yes.
Council, you currently have 6 minutes and 53 seconds remaining.
Could you please introduce yourself to the board?
Sydney Ogden. I'm a librarian at the Hamiltonian Public Library, and on the weekends I work a valet job to make some extra money.
Ms. Ogden, do you know Charlie Gibbons?
I do.
What's your relationship with him?
We knew each other in high school, but we weren't the best of friends.
And do you know Evan Shen?
I do.
What's your relationship with him?
Evan and I were great friends in high school. We were in drama club together, and we acted a lot.
And were you able to ever see Mr. Gibbons and Mr. Shen together?
Yes, they were great friends in high school, but then they had a sort of falling out when Charlie began hanging with the wrong kind of crowd at school.
Now I'd like to turn your attention to the night of the laptop, the day of the alleged Facebook search. What were you doing out there?
I was working for my valet company as a parking attendant at the clothes party.
Your Honor, permission for the witness to approach the scene.
Yes.
Ms. Ogden, where were you during the party?
I was out here on the driveway parking cars.
Were you there the entire time?
No, during the fireworks there were no cars presented, so I was here on the covered porch area.
And did you have a clear view of the guests from where you were standing?
Yes, from where I was, I could see straight back to all the guests on the patio who stood watching the fireworks facing away from the living room.
And did you see Evan Shen go near the gallery during the fireworks?
No, I did not.
Did you see anyone go near the gallery during the fireworks?
Yes, I saw Charlie Gibbons actually. He was exiting this hallway gallery here.
And where does this hallway lead to?
Only the gallery.
And do you think there was anything unusual about that?
Yes, everyone else was outside watching the fireworks. I saw no reason for Charlie to be inside that time.
Objection, Your Honor, this is speculation.
In response.
Yes. This is not speculation because she is just explaining why she thought it was unusual because all the other party guests were standing out there. There's absolutely no reason for Mr. Gibbons to be there.
In response.
Yes, I would argue that Charlie Gibbons is not every party guest. Guest is an individual, and we can't have one witness speculate just to the whereabouts of every single person and why they're there.
Overruled.
Permission for the witness to hear.
Yes.
Now, Ms. Ogden, were you able to see what Mr. Gibbons was wearing that night?
Yeah, he had on this big tan trench coat.
Objection, Your Honor, all of this.
Overruled.
And what was the weather like that night?
It was a beautiful summer night. It was July 4th.
And when you saw Mr. Gibbons leaving the gallery, did you see what was in his hands?
No, I couldn't see his hands at all, actually.
Thank you. No further questions.
Good evening, Ms. Ogden. Were you close to Evan Shen at the time you were in school with him?
Yes, I was.
Would you presently describe him as having a talent for painting works of art?
Yes, he's been a great painter.
Would you say that Evan Shen is proficient at graphic art?
I would think so, yes.
In your words, were his recreations at, or at the very least, near a professional level?
I'm not sure what's professional. I mean, they were good.
In your opinion, specifically referring to your witness statement, would you say that in your own words they were near a professional level?
His imitations and sketches in high school were, yes.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Is it correct that in your opinion, Evan Shen was transfixed by Marty Cole's paintings, especially in Dream?
Yes.
It's true that you worked as a valet for Marty Cole at this local flag, correct?
Yes, for my valet complaints.
And as you said, you watched the fireworks show from outside the covered patio, during which time you had a clear view of the guests, correct?
Yes, I had a clear view of the guests.
And at this time, where you were standing, watching the fireworks show, you saw Charlie Gibbons, correct?
Yes, I saw Charlie Gibbons.
It's also true that at this time of the theft, you did not see Evan Shen, correct?
No, I did not see him.
So despite the fact that Gibbons said that he saw Shen run back to the gallery, Shen himself stated that he ran back to the gallery. You did not see Evan Shen at that time.
No.
You hold Evan Shen in high regard, correct?
Yes, we're good friends.
In your opinion, was Marty McCulloch's gallery in good hands under Mr. Shen's supervision?
I thought so.
To substantiate that claim for the benefit of the court, could you provide any examples where Mr. Shen was particularly protected over Mr. McCullough's art collection?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, you say that you believe that Mario McCullough's art collection is in good hands under Average Shen's care, correct?
Yes.
To avoid the speculation, can you provide for the court any evidence as to the fact that Mr. Shen was particularly protected over Mr. McCullough's art collection, or perhaps a good dose in any other situations?
Well, he's always been a great imitator of art, and he's always loved his art, and I feel like he's protected right in his gallery art, very much so.
Let's break that down.
Objection, this question does have a scope of holiness and statement.
I would argue that because the witness comes to the stand in an effort to vouch for Mr. Shen's character, it's relevant as to whether or not she may be able to actually provide any evidence that he's a particularly strong dose of protective of her art.
Are you asking the witness to manufacture evidence outside of the witness's statement?
I would hope that inside of this statement, she may be able to provide some insight into the fact.
Is there something in the statement you can point to?
No, not herself, no.
I will sustain the objection.
In that case, Your Honor, no further questions. Thank you very much.
Any further questions?
No, Your Honor. May I please adjourn?
Please, have a seat in the audience. You may call your next witness.
Defense calls Evan Shen.
Evan Shem, please step forward. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition? Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Evan Shem, S-H-E-M.
You may be seated.
Before I proceed, I would request the waiver to replace Exhibit C with Exhibits A and B. I'd also like to request a motion.
Yes.
Counsel, you currently have 5 minutes and 1 second remaining.
You may proceed. I think they're balanced. Yes.
Will you please introduce yourself to the court?
I'm Evan. I'm a graduate student at Peninsula University, and I study art.
What are your career aspirations?
I one day aspire to be a great artist, seeing as my absolute passion in life is art.
And how do you work towards that goals?
Well, ever since high school, I've been making replicas of paintings that I admire. I think it's a great way to fine-tune my skills as an artist.
Now, I'd like to ask you about a man named Trevor Gibbons. Do you know him?
Yes.
How do you know him?
Charlie and I were great friends since 3rd grade. We kind of drifted apart, though, in high school.
Why is that?
Charlie started hanging out with people I really didn't want to be associated with, and he started getting into trouble with law.
Did you ever reconnect with him after high school?
Yeah, actually, I was walking on campus one day, and that's when Charlie bumped into me. He asked if he could stay with me for a little while.
Did you agree to that?
Yeah.
Why did you agree?
I didn't think it'd be for too long.
During his stay with you, did Mr. Gibbons ever contribute to the event?
No.
And why did you let him stay with you?
I felt sorry for an old friend, but Charlie seemed like he hadn't changed much since high school, and he was definitely going to attack me.
Now, Evan, I'd like to ask you about Professor McCullough. Do you know him?
Of course, McCullough was my favorite art history professor at HU, and I interned for him for quite some time.
Are you familiar with one of the paintings that he owns? Fusion by Budgie Exhibit?
Yes, when I first saw it in his gallery, it really struck a chord with me. We talked about the painting a lot after class, we even seemed to bond over it.
Did you make a copy of that painting?
I did, as I tend to do with many paintings that I admire.
Now, Evan, regarding Marty McCullough's July 4th party, were you there?
Yeah.
What were you doing there?
Professor had asked me to be a docent at his gallery, meaning I would digest his gallery and answer any and all questions they had.
Did you go to his party alone?
No, Charlie insisted on being my +1 that night, so I brought him along.
After the gallery viewing that you were dosing for, what did you do?
guests out of the gallery because the fireworks show was starting. However, sometime into that show, I ran back to the gallery because I realized I forgot to lock it.
Around what time is that?
No later than 9:15.
Well, what time is the gallery supposed to be on?
9 o'clock.
So what is that 15-minute time period mean for the art inside the gallery?
The art was unmanned and untended for 15 more minutes.
And were you carrying something on the night of July 4th?
Yeah, I had a backpack with me.
What was inside that backpack?
Art supplies. I wanted to sketch the guests while they watched the fireworks show.
Did you ever get a chance to?
No, I didn't. I was too busy running around the mansion fulfilling my duties as a docent, and especially since I had forgotten to lock up the gallery. I simply didn't find the time to.
Now, Evan, on the night of July 4th, was Charlie David still staying with you?
No, but I agreed to let Charlie spend the night at my house.
Did you ever see him enter your apartment that night?
No, I couldn't find him when the party ended, so I just went home. It had been a long night. I wasn't going to wait for him. I was asleep by the time he got home.
After the party was all over, on July 7th, who, if anyone, contacted you?
2 minutes.
Regarding treason?
Detective Barron showed up at my door. She asked if she could search my apartment.
Did you agree to that?
Of course, I had nothing to hide.
Detective Barron found Exhibit A in your apartment. Can you please identify that?
Sure, it's the replica they back in March.
You also found Exhibit D in your storage cabinet locker. Did you identify that?
That is a picture of Fletcher Ezu art collectors.
Did you make that list?
Yes?
Why did you make that list?
I was taking initiative, trying to be a good intern for Mr. McCullough. I wanted to further research the value of trees and make it happen.
And then, do you know where you did?
Yes, I'm in charge of theft by larceny for Mr. McCullough's treason.
Do you have anything to do with that?
Absolutely not.
Thank you very much for your questions.
You may cross-examine.
Yes, Your Honor. Some prosecution would like to request a time check for cross-examination.
Counsel, you currently have 5 minutes and 29 seconds remaining.
Thank you. May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Good evening, Mr. Shannon. Mr. Shannon, isn't it true that your favorite painting in Martin Nicole's gallery was treason?
Yes?
It had a hypnotic quality, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
Did you ever replicate treason?
I did.
Did you ever show your replica to Martin Nicola?
Now, I felt he'd be hypercritical of my work.
Even though you showed all your other replicas to the professor for critiques.
I did.
Now, did you ever try to find out the value of treason?
I did.
And you found out before the 4th of July party, correct?
Yes.
You were told treason was valued at $100,000, correct?
Objection, this is hearsay.
Overruled.
Did you repeat your answer?
Yes.
And after college, you accumulated $50,000 in debt, correct?
Yes, all of it's getting quite expensive these days.
And wasn't it true that you were unhappy with the fact that you were going to have to cope with another $75,000 in graduate school expenses?
Well, not necessarily. I knew that I had to sacrifice a lot to study art.
But specifically, in your witness statement, you say that you were unhappy, correct?
It was quite a lot of money.
Yes?
Yes.
So, as of the night of the party, Mr. Shannon, you were $125,000 in debt, correct?
Just back then.
And did you get paid more in Martin Nicole's gallery?
No.
And isn't it true you were unhappy with the fact that you were not getting paid?
Yes, I knew I had to start looking for a job.
So, moving forward to the night of July 4th, you were working as a docent at Martin Nicole's art gallery that night, correct?
Yes.
From 7 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Yes.
And is it true that your job is to lock the doors at 9 p.m.?
Yes, it is, but I forgot to do so.
And is it true that the fireworks show was supposed to start at 9 p.m. to escort the guests outside?
As I did.
Did you follow all the instructions Martin Nicole laid out to you as a docent?
No.
You realized that you would fail to lock the gallery doors around 9:15, correct?
Yes.
So you went back unaccompanied with your backpack while all the other guests were watching fireworks to lock it, didn't you?
I did look it, yes.
So the next day you got a call from Martin Nicole saying that treason had been stolen, correct?
Yes.
But you assured Nicole that no painting had been disturbed.
Yes.
However, nowhere in your witness statement do you say that you checked each individual painting to make sure they had not been disturbed. Do you?
Well, I looked inside to the gallery and saw that there was nothing going on, so
You
then
saw no one was in there, but did you check each individual painting?
Objection, this is outside the scope of the witness statement.
And what's your response?
Your Honor, the point here is that Mr. McCullough may have claimed to have made sure that all the paintings were okay, but nor in his witness statement does he say that.
Sustained. It is beyond his statement.
Now, you state that you didn't show your replica of treason to the professor because it was too far from the truth, correct?
Yes.
But if it was so far from the truth, why was it that the professor didn't recognize that it was a fake until after he got a call from MT's Fine Art Auction House?
I wouldn't know.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any further questions?
Yes, Your Honor. And then, did you ever get a chance to tell Martin Nicole about your findings?
1 minute.
The only other time I had contact with Mr. McCullough was when he called me and told me that the paint had been stolen. So I also thought it would be very inappropriate to talk about the price of such paint.
And did your students at Warden?
Yes, but I knew that studying art would someday, I would become a great artist, and I knew that someday it would pay off.
And again, other 36 questions that the prosecutor has just asked you. How many did Detective Teresa ask you when she knocked on your door?
No.
30 seconds.
Outside is here.
I'm sorry,
Was there a term that was outside is here for my cross-examination?
overall. The witness may step down, have a seat at the table, please. Are there any further witnesses for the people?
No, Your Honor, the defense press.
I'm sorry, the evidence. Okay, closing arguments. Starting with the people.
People would also like to receive a time check for the closing.
Counsel, you currently have 6 minutes and 6 seconds to go.
Thank you. Permission to move about the courtroom during my closing, Your Honor?
Yes.
May I proceed?
Yes.
Your Honor, as we stated before, this is a case of two treasons. The first being the painting treason that was stolen from Marty McCullough's gallery, and the second being the outright act of callous betrayal that Mr. Shem committed against his employer, Marty McCullough. Now, the defense will tell you that the prosecution has failed to meet their burden of proof, and that there is still plenty of doubt to go around in this case. But there is no doubt, Your Honor, whatsoever that the prosecution has carried their burden of proof and has demonstrated that Mr. Shem is guilty of grand larceny and the theft of treason beyond a reasonable doubt. Your Honor, to use the cliche phrase, means, motive, and opportunity, the prosecution could demonstrate that Mr. Shem orchestrated and perpetrated the theft of treason. Means. Now, the prosecution's witnesses, Charlie Gibbons, established that the defendant was an excellent forger. So good, in fact, that it could be argued his forgeries could fool anybody. And it just so happens that prosecution expert witness Bernie Worcester convincingly testified that the painting found in Marty McCullough's gallery was a forgery. A clever forgery to be sure, but a forgery nonetheless. Now, we know that Mr. Shem created replicas of famous paintings as a method of learning and submitted those paintings to his professor, Marty McCullough, for critiques. But we also know that he made a replica of treason and never showed it to the professor for critiques. This, Your Honor, is remarkably suspect. Now, the defense would like you to believe that no crime was ever committed and that McCullough's treason still resides in his gallery today. But those who try to do so, namely Jamie Sardania of the defense, had to admit that most of her conclusions were inconclusive. Finally, Your Honor, Marty McCullough testified that the defendant had almost permanent access to the gallery, including knowledge of the passcode passcode to the gallery of Treason's house. Motive. Now, all night, the defense has been trying to disprove the reality of two treasons and convince us that either one of two things happened. No crime was ever committed, or that Charlie Gibbons was the one who stole treason. The hypocrisy alone tears the defense's case apart, Your Honor, but both concepts can be proven inconsistent and lacking foundation. The prosecution has already established that the defense expert, Jamie Sardania, failed to show that no crime was ever committed. But we have yet to discuss the cowardly attack on Mr. Gibbons. The defense talks about Mr. Gibbons wearing a tan trench coat to the party, as if that's somehow an indicator of guilt. They never discuss, I might add, the fact that Charlie Gibbons never knew the gallery was unlocked during the fireworks display. However, Your Honor, the prosecution has shown that Evan Shem had all the means to steal treason. Furthermore, the defense has failed to cast any shred of doubt on either the identity of the crime, or the identity of the perpetrator, or the validity of the crime. Now, speaking of motive, Marty McCullough and Charlie Gibbons both testified that the defendant was obsessed with treason, making it the subject of nearly every conversation. Gibbons told the court that he overheard a phone call which the defendant made, in which he adopted a strange accent when inquiring the value of treason and referred to treason as my painting. Gibbons also testified that the defendant had an axe to grind with Marty McCullough after McCullough refused to grant the defendant a paid internship. Furthermore, the defendant himself testified to being a hefty $125,000 in debt on the night of the crime, and coincidentally found out that treason was worth $100,000 2 days before the crime. do so, such as Sidney Ogden, could not come up with a single specific example to justify that conception. Undoubtedly, Evesham had all the motive necessary: a large sum of debt, a poor relationship with treason's owner, and an obsession with treason to steal treason. Opportunity. Now finally, Your Honor, there was an abundance of opportunity in this case for the defendant to steal treason. T.M. Little testified that the defendant was carrying a backpack on the night of the theft, which the defendant claimed to be used for art supplies and an intended sketch of the guests at the party. However, Miss Little also had to admit that she never saw the sketch or the art supplies in the backpack. Mr. Shem testified that he was in charge of the gallery on the night of the theft and that he was the one responsible for leaving the gallery unlocked for an extended period of time. This, Your Honor, is a huge admission. Not only that, but we know that Mr. Shem ran back to the gallery to lock it, supposedly, while all of the guests were distracted watching fireworks. Mr. Shem went alone, while the other guests were distracted, and had his backpack with him when he did this. Your Honor, the defendant had a massive window of opportunity to steal treason on the night of the theft. And who created that window of opportunity? The defendant himself. Your Honor, the prosecution has demonstrated all that is necessary to find the defendant guilty. The defense can provide no other alternate scenarios. They have no other viable suspect. The prosecution has carried their burden of proof in this case. Your Honor, you cannot find Evesham guilty of treason, but you must find him guilty of grand larceny in the theft of treason. Thank you.
Thank you. You may proceed, Mr. Ashby.
May it please the court. Tonight, you have heard time and time again from the prosecution that on July 4th, my client, Mr. Evan Shem, stole the painting Treason by Fletcher Zoo from Marty McCulloch's private gallery. They tried to convince you that while working as a guide to the gallery, he stole the painting and switched it with a replica that he had made. But you heard from 8 witnesses tonight, and not one of them actually saw my client inside the gallery during the fireworks. In fact, not one of them even saw my client take the painting from the gallery. And the fireworks are when the prosecution claims the painting was stolen. The prosecution has failed to provide evidence that my client switched to replica for treason. The evidence shows that on July 4th, there was no switch. As the defense, we bore no burden in today's case. That burden lay with the prosecution and the prosecution alone. They had to prove that no theory other than the theory that my client is guilty makes sense today. Had to prove 3 things beyond a reasonable doubt. 1, that my client actually took the painting from the gallery. 2, that my client took the painting without permission. And 3, that my client intended to steal the painting and to benefit from it. And the prosecution failed to prove all 3 of these elements because the paintings were never switched. First, the prosecution needed to prove that my client took the painting from the gallery. You heard the exact opposite, however, from art expert Jamie Sardeni. She analyzed both paintings and came to the conclusion that the original was found in the professor's mansion, and the replica was found in my client's apartment. She came to this conclusion by using both her naked eye and by using digital imaging analysis to come to the most accurate conclusion. So, if the original painting was found in the professor's mansion, it never could have been removed. My client could never have taken it. There was no switch. Furthermore, you heard testimony from Ms. T.M. Little saying that she saw my client walking outside of the hallway that leads to the gallery during the fireworks, emphasizing that she did not see anything in his hands. The prosecution has failed to produce one shred of direct or circumstantial evidence that my client switched a replica for treason. Failure to prove this first element means failure to prove that my client is guilty. However, next the prosecution needed to prove that my client took the painting without permission. Now, they've already failed to prove that he took it in the first place, so it goes without saying they failed to prove he took it without permission. Therefore, the prosecution failed to prove element number 2, leaving them with just one more chance. Lastly, the prosecution needed to prove that my client intended to steal the painting and to benefit by either selling it for a profit or keeping it for his own personal enjoyment. They tried to tell you that my client has a lot of debt and he wanted to sell the painting to pay off that debt. But let's think about that for just a second. My client's debt comes from his art education, which he was studying so that he could become an artist. As a young, rising star in the art world, my client knows that there is a small, tight-knit community of collectors who admire Fletcher Zoo's work. He understands that they would undoubtedly hear about an offer to sell treason and find it suspicious. But why would Evan risk his career and his reputation as an artist to try and fence a painting to a bunch of collectors who would know it was either fake or stolen? The prosecution's theory makes no sense. The theory of means, motive, and opportunity makes no sense. The facts don't add up. That is reasonable doubt. Now, the prosecution has already failed to prove that my client did switch the right, or that there was a switch. But if the court should find this to be true, they still cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it was my client who took it. Remember, Mr. Shem told you on direct examination that he left the gallery unlocked, which was a human will or human nature and mistake, for 15 whole minutes. That is longer than my closing argument, and there were 200 guests at that party. Anyone could have stolen the painting. That is reasonable doubt. But you also heard from Ms. Wooster, the prosecution expert, say that she concluded the original painting was found in my client's apartment and that the replica was found in the professor's mansion.
2 minutes.
The defense believes that our expert Sardinia's conclusion is more credible than that of Wooster's. But if the court does find that these two testimonies are equal, this is consistent with the fact that the prosecution has failed to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. In fact, I'd also like to point out that Ms. Wooster couldn't even remember when she had received the painting for analysis, further attacking her credibility as an expert. Rather, ladies and gentlemen, Your Honor, the person with the most to gain and the least to lose from switching the paintings was the prosecution's Charlie Gibbons, Evan's former roommate. You heard today that Charlie has a long history of theft and run-ins with the law. You heard today that Charlie has no job, no money, and no prospect of either. You heard today that Charlie insisted to accompany my client to the 4th of July event and was seen circling outside of the gallery during the fireworks, which is again when the prosecution claimed the painting was stolen, wearing a tan trench coat. If the painting was indeed stolen that night, the evidence points to Charlie Gibbons. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen, my client is here today because he has been wrongfully charged with a crime that never occurred. His admiration for his mentor and his exquisite gallery has been twisted into an unbelievable tale of forgery and theft. We ask the court to consider the abject failure of the prosecution
30
to
seconds.
prove any element of the crime charged, or that even a crime occurred in the first place. After due consideration, we believe the court will find our client not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. A rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Your Honor, the defense can talk about witnesses and their failure to prove guilt in some form or another, but let's look at circumstances. We know that treason was found in Evan Shem's apartment and that it was stolen. We know that Shem was in a large sum of debt. We know that Shem knew that the $100,000 of treason would alleviate all but $25,000 of his debt. And for the defense saying that Shem would sell it or trying to sell it would not make any sense because all the art collectors that could possibly have it sold to would recognize it as a fake or stolen, there is a black market that
30
exists.
seconds.
Circumstances cannot lie, witnesses can. And when you have to consider the circumstances of the witnesses, the circumstances which cannot lie must be first and foremost important. And these circumstances point to the guilt of Evan Shem, and therefore you must find Evan Shem guilty.
Thank you.
Stop.
Okay, we'll start the prosecution. Are there any procedural objections?
Perhaps not objection, but we wonder if it was proper that the defense address the scoring attorneys as opposed to Your Honor. And second, there's absolutely no issue as to the identification of the defendant. The mock trial rules of California cannot require this. That's it.
Any response? These scorers have heard that and you may consider it as they wish to do so.
The defense has felt one objection, not necessarily an objection, but we noticed that in his closing argument, the attorney from the prosecution side made reference to something that was stricken from the record, specifically as to Ogden's failure to identify any one specific example of how Evan Shannon protected running the Courthouse gallery.
The court finds that there are no procedural objections as to either side. Would the defendant please rise? Now remember that my verdict has absolutely nothing to do with this court. I could go home and think about it for a few days. Okay, both sides have presented some excellent witnesses. The attorneys have been very knowledgeable and extremely articulate. I find the defendant to be guilty as charged. He will be an extremely talented artist in state prison very soon. Let's have a big round of applause for everyone. It has been said that these cases are being won or lost by the attorney. It's actually not true. A case is won or lost by the witnesses in the case. All of the witnesses were excellent. They knew their entire story, and they were able to present it in a very articulate manner. So would all of the witnesses please stand, turn around, and face the audience. Perhaps the most difficult part of the entire case is our pretrial motion. The attorneys were very articulate. They certainly knew their work and were very persuasive. So would you please stand and turn around and face the audience. Our clerk and bailiff, please stand and face the audience. And we're both ordered to my courtroom at 8:30 tomorrow morning. Okay, starting with the prosecution, I'd like to know which law school you went to. You know, I see every day lawyers in trial on very serious cases. In this very courtroom, there are many lawyers who will appear every day. And many of them are very nervous when they walk into the courtroom. They are not particularly articulate. You have no idea how extremely poised all of you are, how articulate all of you are, how knowledgeable, and the skill set that you have picked up in your preparation for this case. And I applaud all of you. I only wish I could have all of you in my courtroom every day also. So please stand, face the audience for a big round of applause. I'm sure that you had some help in your preparation on this case. So all of the attorneys and teacher coaches, please stand. A few comments only before we leave. Okay, first of all, there are no losers in this courtroom. Everyone is a true winner. In a few minutes, I'll be announcing who the winning team is, who's going to go on to the finals. I always wish I could say that you're both going on to the finals. I am so glad that I don't have to score this. These fine folks over here who have a ton of experience, and have a round of applause for them. we are very blessed today to have one of the finest artists in the nation who has been to my courtroom, and I've seen her fine work. And that's Mona Schaefer Edwards. If you would please stand. It should be and last but not least, all day long in another courtroom, we've had two of our court reporters working all day. And these are real reporters. And they do an amazing job. They have to get down every single word that is said by the attorneys and the witnesses and the court and everyone else in the courtroom. And I'm sure that they would agree with me. They only wish that the attorneys in court every day and the witnesses were as clear and concise and as articulate as all of you have been here tonight, because you've made their job so much easier. But thank you for our court reporters. Okay, now this is the assistant presiding judge's courtroom, and I've moved all the chairs and things around. And when he comes in tomorrow morning, he's going to expect everything back in place. So if we can ask you to help put everything back where we found it, and if everybody would report to Department 1 on the second floor, in room 222, we will have the award ceremony. So my congratulations. Your Honor, this one, the most obvious, what are you doing next night? Okay, so the MVP award. Are we done? Johnny, that's